our audience is sensitive, smart women. So likely a lot of them are maybe on the spectrum themselves, maybe not even knowingly.
Well, that's the thing. There's a lot of people that discover they're on the spectrum when the kids get diagnosed. That happens all the time.
A lot of people don't see doors to opportunity. I want to open doors for other people now. I figure that is what I should be doing.
That's amazing. I mean, I've learned so much just preparing for this about the different kinds of traits that I never would have thought of as being part of the spectrum that I may even have. We're so often misdiagnosed, right? Especially girls.
Yeah, especially girls. That's right. But I think the way I kind of look at it is a brain can be more social emotional, or a brain can be more interested in interesting stuff and what they think about. So half the population of the world is going to go more social emotional, and the other half is going to lean more to the autism side. And at what point do you slap a label on it? When slightly geeky become autistic?
I've got to always be on my best behavior because a lot of kids look up to me and I want to inspire them. While it's cold
and it's true. I realize how lucky I am to work with Temple Grandin. I'm really lucky. We go through this place.
When I was younger, I used to look for great, mysterious meanings of life. When I've gotten older, I've thought the most important things are the things that I do help do something real to make something better.
Temple just is one of those people who feels that her existence on earth depends upon her making contributions to others. And I truly believe that God gave her a gift that she feels she must share.
Funny how all we need is found on the inside.
Welcome to the Mama Bear Family Care Mastermind Summit. I'm Sherilyn and I will be hosting the summit. Today we have the privilege of talking to a very special guest, Dr. Temple Grandin. Dr. Grandin is a professor of animal sciences at Colorado State University. Facilities she has designed for handling livestock are used by companies worldwide. She has been instrumental in implementing animal welfare auditing programs that are used by McDonald's, Wendy's, Whole Foods, and many other corporations. Temple has appeared on numerous TV shows, such as 2020, Larry King Live, and Prime Time. Dr. Grandin is also an accomplished author. Her books include Thinking in Pictures, Livestock Handling and Transport, and The Autistic Brain. Her books, Animals in Translation and Visual Thinking, have been featured on the New York Times bestseller list. In 2010, she was listed as a hero in Time Magazine's 100 Most Influential People in the World. In 2017, Dr. Grandin was inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame, and in 2022, she was honored as a Colorado State University Distinguished Professor. She is also autistic. Diagnosed with autism in 1950 and unable to talk until she was 3.5 years old, this prominent speaker, author, and gifted animal scientist has broken through seemingly insurmountable obstacles with her remarkable achievements. Her extraordinary life story was brought to life in a multiple Emmy Award-winning HBO movie starring Claire Danes, which was based on Temple's book, Thinking in Pictures. She is considered a renowned expert on both the topics of animal science and autism. Temple speaks a lot about the different kinds of brains and how we need all of them. We'll be talking about how understanding and honoring different kinds of thinking empowers everyone. So hello, Dr. Grandin. Thank you so much for making the time to join us today.
It's great to be here today.
Wonderful. So I've been really enjoying your latest book, Visual Thinking.
Oh, good.
I'm almost at the end of it now. My bookmark's at the very end.
Well, I hope it's given you some insights.
It is. It's blowing my mind, honestly.
What's blowing your mind the most?
Oh my goodness. It's sometimes hard for me to think on the spot, but I've getting into I'll be getting into some of that, especially about the connection you made. I'll go into this a little bit later, but about the possible decline of our civilization and how it could be so simply fixed by including different kinds of thinkers.
Well, basically, I'm very concerned about skill loss, especially the object visualizers like me. We're the
Yes.
people that are good with animals, art, photography, and mechanical things. But the problem is we're getting screened out of the educational system because they can't do higher math. But you need it.
Wow.
You want to keep the lights on, you want to keep the water systems working, all those mechanical things working. I see them building these big fancy buildings in downtown New York, the Baccarat Tower. I can tell you, you don't want to be in an apartment on the 60th floor if the water pumps are broken.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Right? Such basic things. It's amazing that
people don't think about it. I've gone to New York, stayed in a fancy, super fancy, expensive hotel, one of the financial companies, right on the harbor. Look out the window. You get the waves come up 2 feet, that basement's going to be flooded. And not one person working in that fancy place ever has been in the basement to look at the equipment that's necessary to keep that building habitable.
Wow.
You need my kind of mind.
Yes, that's amazing. You can spot the problems before they even happen that most people don't even think of.
Well, the thing that we see in my book, Visual Thinking, I talk about 3 basic kinds of thought. Object visualizers like me, and then there's the mathematical thinkers. They think in patterns, the visual spatial mathematical thinkers. Then there's word thinkers. And there's a lot of people are mixtures of the different kinds of thinking. But I'm an extreme object visualizer. So abstract math doesn't make any sense to me. An object visualizer can just see how things work.
So abstract math would be like algebra, right?
That's right. And we're like in the state of California, I don't think I'd graduate my school. And why are they pushing algebra so much? Well, you see, the people that think more verbally or mathematically think you need algebra for logical thought. That is not how I think. I will just see a solution to a problem. I do a lot of talks on this to businesses, and one time I was at the corporate office of a travel website with their disability committee, and the blind person was telling me about all the problems he had finding gates at the airport. So I just thought, gate finder app.
Oh.
And as he walks through the airport, they will talk to him. And that's totally doable. I know just enough about transponder technology that's totally doable. But you see, that's something specific, and I just saw it. And that's not something vague like having an inclusive airport. It's something specific that would very much help a blind person in a big airport.
Yes. I love how you talk about that.
You see, that's specific. And then I thought about the deaf person and where they'd have problems at the Denver airport and where they wouldn't. We've got these gates, I hate them. There's 3 or 4 aircraft on a single door. You can't see any of them. And so you're totally dependent on the announcement. But I call that a non-visual gate. Where the other gates, I can see whether the plane is parked at the jet bridge. I can see the people line up. I don't even have to listen to the announcements.
Yeah.
But there's a few gates where if you were deaf, you'd be in a lot of trouble. One door, 3 or 4 airplanes, and if you don't, and you can't see any of the airplanes. And they make an announcement to go through this door and go down the stairs or the elevator. And if you're not paying attention, you'll miss your flight.
Wow. I mean,
I'm just seeing it, and airports is a place to spend a lot of time there. And so I'm calling them visual gates and non-visual gates. So I said, and that's how I only have to deal with some kind of accommodation in the non-visual gates. The visual gates you don't need to.
Oh, interesting.
And then the other thing that the deaf person would get is get all the airline apps. And they come up with text messages.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, so I can imagine how that would contribute to efficiency and help a lot of people not miss their flights.
you see, it's something specific. Okay, let's look at something to do to help the deaf person, something to do to help the blind person.
Mhm.
And it's not talking about, theory. One thing I'm very concerned about right now is you've got people making policy that don't have the knowledge. I was recently at a meeting and I talked to a state legislator. I'm not going to say what state they were in, anything like that, because I'm not being very complimentary. But here's a person in a state legislature making educational policy, and this is real recent, did not know that autism can also come in a non-verbal, non-speaking type. This person did not know that. This is very, very recent.
My goodness.
Scary that they are making policy where their knowledge is that lacking.
Yes. That's shocking.
I think it's shocking. And this is just very recently. I won't say what state it was in.
Well, I appreciate your graciousness there. But that's one of the reasons that you speak a lot, right? And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to do the summit, is to get the information out there for people who may not have heard about a lot of this stuff, and maybe have not thought about it in the ways that you teach. As we talked about, the focus of this summit is empowering our audience, which is mainly women. And one of the things I've heard you talk about a lot that I really resonate with is the need for confidence. And you have some interesting examples from your own life, advocating for yourself and displaying confidence.
Well, also seeing opportunities. There's seen the HBO movie where I get the editor's card. I go up and I get the card and I produce the article. Now, just the other day, I was on a Zoom call talking to a bright student that during COVID had looked up a whole bunch of brain research stuff and really studied the literature. And she wrote to a scientist. She's now working in his lab. She didn't have the confidence to send the email. Unfortunately, her teacher told her to send, like the scientist thought it was another researcher. She was so knowledgeable. She's in a lab now. You see that? But she wouldn't have sent the email if her teacher had encouraged her to send the email.
That makes so much sense. And honestly, the movie about your life really inspired me so much. So when I was planning for the summit, your name just popped into my head, and I didn't think I had a shot at all. I didn't expect to hear back from you at all, but it was just your name popping into my head brought back all of the lessons from the movie that I watched years ago. And I thought, well, why not? And here you are, and it's amazing what can happen when you're willing to knock on the doors.
Well, that's right. And there's a lot of back doors into things, and people don't see them. Now, being a weird, girl nerd starting out in the cattle industry in the 70s, the way I sold jobs is I showed off my work. I learned to sell my work and not myself. That's what I did.
That's
show the work off. And when I showed off my drawings, I got respect. Here's an example of one of my drawings right there.
Oh my.
And when I showed off my drawings, I got respect.
Yes.
I learned to sell my work rather than myself.
That makes so much sense.
You got to get those drawings in the hands of the right person.
Yes. And it takes the focus off
resources.
Get them in the hands of the right person, and it takes the focus off of you, right? And what about us as individuals might be distracting for other people, especially if we're not neurotypical and might be missing some of the normal social cues, or coming across as a little bit different. If that's a really useful tip to get ahead, is to let our work speak for us.
That's right.
So that people aren't relying on some of these things we may not be able to do as well as other people that they might be expecting or using.
I've been out to the tech companies, and I think half those programmers are the mathematical type of autistic. And I'm the object visualizer type. And when I was out working on equipment, I had people build things for me that I'm sure were autistic. And they owned big shops. And they started out just with one little welder. And I think in a lot of ways we're paying the price for taking out all the hands-on classes where the kids like me can excel.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And, you know, a lot of times with children who are a little bit different, we tend to discourage behaviors that we consider disruptive. And of course, we're trying to teach them, but what I'm thinking of is what may have seemed like problems even when you were young. I heard the story about you standing up for yourself when you were young. Someone called you something in a classroom and you threw something at her. Can you tell us about that story? You threw a book. What happened?
In ninth grade, I threw a book at her, a big, heavy social studies book.
Oh my.
Out of school for that.
Yeah. And so a lot of people might think of that as a negative thing that you had to learn to control, but I see it as, even in its imperfect state, you know, that was the best you could do at the time, and you were still displaying an important life skill.
Well, I don't know that. What ended up having to happen on some of that stuff when I got bullied was change from anger to crying. Crying doesn't get you through. That's what I had to do. You throw work, you get fired. It's just not tolerated.
That makes sense. And at the same time, you still retain that capacity to stand up for yourself. You just learn different ways to do it, like the time you were talking about.
When I got, you know, if you watch the movie where they put bull testicles on my vehicle that I'm getting kicked out, I still figure, you know, my way to get back at that was I'm going to write for that magazine. Then they're going to you see, that's sort of a positive way of dealing with it, where other people would go back and like break windows or something.
Right.
It's totally destructive.
Yes. I love that.
Motivation for me when I was in my 20s is to prove I wasn't stupid. And I went to a super interesting conference that this grandson of Gandhi spoke at, you know, for youth with problems. And he said, anger's like electricity. You can use it in a good way, like to light up your house and do good things, or it'd be lightning bolts just busting stuff up. Well, you know, you have kind of the good anger. Yeah, I'm going to prove I'm not stupid.
Right.
That's much more constructive than if I went back and broke some stuff.
Absolutely. And I love that you transmuted it and you didn't let it make you withdraw inside completely, you know. Instead, you could have, when you started getting feedback from people that you can't fight, you have to stop fighting or whatever. When you were being bullied.
I had some good people that supported me. I had some very good mentors. My mother, my third grade teacher, my high school science teacher, Jim, a contractor who was starting a tiny little steel and concrete company. He seeked me out. There were some very, very good mentors. There were some really good ranchers. There was Ann out at the ranch. And having these mentors made a big difference because I could call them up and talk to them.
That's really good to know and to keep in mind for those of us who have children in our lives, even if they're not our own, right?
Well, what I found on getting launched into a successful career, it starts first with exposure. And we've got too many kids today growing up, they've never used a tool, they don't cook, they don't sew, they don't do any of that kind of stuff. And they're not getting exposed to enough career options. So it starts out with exposure, but then you have to have mentoring. Even that's how Michelangelo started. He was a little 12-year-old school dropout, but he was running around the churches looking at great art. Okay, that's exposure. Every church was commissioning it. And he had stone cutting tools. See, that's the exposure. Then when he started making stuff, he was then apprenticed into a studio. Somebody saw the talent and he's pulled into a studio. So it starts out with exposure, then mentoring. That's a really important path.
Yes, that makes so much sense. It really, yeah. So how did you, you know, I can imagine even for somebody like Michelangelo, who a lot of these people that you mentioned in your book and in other places, they, you know, they had also some of the other traits that go along with the spectrum, which anxiety is one of them, for example. So how did you get past the anxiety
I've had anxiety. It was horrible all through my 20s, colitis attacks that absolutely wouldn't stop. I've been on a low dose of antidepressants for 40 years. And the colitis cleared up when I got on the antidepressants.
Oh, wow.
And I know other people that have gone, it has to be a low dose. The big mistake that's made is that the dose on the label is too high for anxiety. It might be half a starter dose, might be half a starter dose, whatever the starter dose for the drug is. And Prozac and Lexapro have been two drugs that have worked really well. And in this book, my old book, Thinking in Pictures, I discuss my experiences with medication. And even though this is 27 years old, it's still accurate. The drugs really have not changed.
Okay. Well, that's really good to know. That explains why, you know, someone like me, for example, I took antidepressants before. I'm convinced I was misdiagnosed multiple times. I was never even tested for being on the spectrum. That never even seemed to come into anyone's mind. But on the dose of antidepressants that I was on, you know, I did have depression, but I also had anxiety. And so it may have exacerbated the anxiety, even if it helped the depression, which it might explain why they had to add on so many other things to go with it.
I'm just taking the one medication, that's all.
Okay, well,
I've also seen people very stable on maybe some Prozac or some Lexapro, and they go, oh, I don't need this anymore. And they go off. I just talked to one lady real recently, and she went off, and then when she went back on, the drug didn't work as well. I can say if you're stable, stay on it.
That makes sense to me. I can see the wisdom in that.
It's especially important if you're bipolar.
Okay, right.
It's even more important then.
Yeah, well, on that subject, I remember watching an interview with you and two other women at the Temple Grandin school, and one of them had been actually misdiagnosed as bipolar. So some people who may have received that diagnosis, if it was a misdiagnosis, that could be.
The problem with these diagnoses is they're not very accurate.
Yeah,
they're behavioral profiles. It isn't like getting a diagnosis for COVID or for tuberculosis, where it's a definitive diagnosis. That's not how it works.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's a behavioral profile. The other thing is nobody's changing the diagnosis for tuberculosis.
Right.
But the Psychiatric Association has changed, you know, the guidelines for autism. See, it used to be you had to have early onset by age 3 with speech delay. And then in the early 90s, they added the Asperger's, where it's basically socially awkward, no speech delay. And then the latest guidelines merged everything together. So now you've got Einstein at one end of the spectrum, because he had no speech delay 3. Other end of the spectrum, you've got a very severe, nonverbal, uncontrollable epilepsy, just really severe.
Wow.
Everything in between.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's really hard to work with.
Well, that's the problem. And verbal thinkers tend to overgeneralize. And I'm seeing too many kids where the parents get locked into the label and they don't think the kid can do anything. And I'm seeing kids that have never gone shopping. They're just not doing anything on their own.
Yes. Yeah, that's a problem that can stunt their growth when it's not really necessary for them to live a life of disability, right?
Well, you see, the thing is, the mildest forms of autism are probably a personality variant, because there's a very interesting paper about animals called Solitary Mammals as a model for autism. And our lions are more social than panthers or leopards. And panthers and leopards have some crossover with autism. Are they disabled? No.
Right.
At that point, it's a personality variant. Then as you get more severe, you get into things that can really be a disability.
Yes, that makes sense. That really makes sense. So,
well, then one of the things that's not looked at enough is sensory issues. And let's talk about some ways that help that. Some really simple ways. Okay, so if you have a child that's terrified of the vacuum cleaner, let the kid turn it on and off. Let the kid control it. And they may get totally used to it and like playing with the vacuum cleaner. Now, let's say you have a sound like babies crying or dogs barking, you can't control that. So then you put that on a really good audio device, full spectrum, really good quality audio device. The kid can control it, turn it on and off, play it at different volumes. That also can be helpful.
Like a recording of those
A
sounds?
recording, yeah, but it needs
Oh
to
my
be a high
goodness.
quality recording.
Okay.
It can't be a file where all the high frequencies are clipped. You've got to have the full
Okay.
spectrum.
I've never heard of that approach before, but that really, what it reminds me of is NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, is that people learn how to reframe
Yeah,
an
that's
experience, right?
But I've talked to a lot of low income folks, and we got to figure out stuff that they can do.
Yes.
I like the nice, simple things. The other big mistake that's made is wearing headphones all the time to block out. Then you get more sensitive. What you want to do is have them with you all the time, so you have control.
Yeah.
And then you wear them.
I'm going to start practicing.
Is the control.
Mm-hmm.
But control. Okay, then another issue that some autistic people have, dyslexics have got, head injury also has, is visual sensitivities. Like seeing flicker on fluorescent lights, but also on LED lights. And you know how you can find out if the lights flicker? Got your phone, put it in regular slow motion, not super slow motion. Just regular slow motion, and make sure you play it back in slow motion. And you'll find the lights that flicker that bother maybe 10 or 20% of the people with some of these things.
Oh my goodness. That's so smart. I've never heard that.
From a lighting contractor at a book table.
Oh my goodness.
And I've been spreading it around.
Well, thank you so much.
And you have to find ones that don't flicker.
Yes.
And another simple thing, and I just talked to a lady yesterday at the airport, is some dyslexics, probably only 10 or 20%, have a problem with seeing the print wiggle on the page, on a black print with white paper. Try different pale papers. Like this is my child's project book, Calling All Minds. See that light blue on the back there?
Yes.
Try the pastel papers, light blue, light tan, light lavender papers. And nobody knows why it works. But for the individuals that see the print jiggle on the page, it works. I was just down in Texas, and there was a lady there, had autism student, and there was a little ticket on the counter for a workshop that was that light blue paper. I said, read. And she goes, I can read that.
Wow.
And it only works on a subgroup of dyslexics. It's not all dyslexics. It's only 10 or 20%. But when it works, it's like magic.
That's amazing.
And it's a simple thing to do. And somebody might say, well, that's not evidence-based. I said, it's colored paper here. And the thing is, you will know instantly whether or not it works. Instantly. Now, here's another book that's got Miss Barry Prezant's book, kind of a lavender color.
Okay.
You see, you're using those pale colors, and the kid has to pick, or the adult has to pick the color. You can also use overlays, but they get scratched. I think it's better to print the homework, buy paper and print the homework on it.
Yeah. Oh, that's so smart. It makes so much sense.
It's actually been known for years.
Wow.
The problem you have on doing research is, let's say I take all the dyslexics and I try colored paper. They'll say, well, it has no effect because 80% of them doesn't work. But then on the 20%, the ones that complain about the print moving on the page, it does work.
Okay.
And it's something that's so simple. It's completely safe. It costs almost nothing to experiment with it. And like in 5 seconds, whether it's going to work.
It could be life-changing.
Oh, yeah. I talked to a lady at the airport yesterday, too. Her daughter had this problem. And I said, get some paper, the color of your light blue coat that she had. I want the pale colors. And just try that.
Yeah.
Because there's some of these really simple things can make a really, really big difference. Another issue is I don't have very good working memory. So the thing that I do not remember is long strings of verbal yakety yak. So if I have to do a task that has a sequence, I need to make a pilot's checklist. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. a
Okay.
pilot's checklist. I need an external working memory. This would save a ton of jobs.
Yes.
People on the spectrum.
That makes so much sense.
And then, I heard a sad story about an electrician apprentice that lost a job because the boss go yak, 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 and then he installed the wrong switches in the wrong places. If
Oh,
he just could have written down the dimmer switch goes by the door and the regular switch goes by the bed,
yeah.
just write down the things they were going to install each day.
Yeah.
And the other thing is avoid the rapid multitasking jobs like chaotic takeout windows.
Mhm.
Just avoid them.
I'm laughing because one of the worst job experiences I've ever had was working for a fast food company that I won't name by name, because it was completely bewildering.
It's chaotic. Now, what one McDonald's did, because my mind thinks in specific examples, I don't think in concepts, like just make accommodations. Well, at this McDonald's, the autistic lady ran the cash register, but if the store got super busy, they put her on cleaning tables. And that's a simple accommodation that was just made in that store with that manager.
That would have helped me.
Where people get into trouble in jobs when a boss changes. That's a very dangerous time.
Oh, yes, yes, that makes sense. One of the things, and you'll understand why I bring this up now in a moment, but this makes me think of one of the things that really stood out to me from your book, Visual Thinking, is it really struck me when you said that you saw an Egyptian mummy exhibit in 4th grade, and you noticed that as you went forward in time, the designs were more simple instead of becoming more sophisticated. And you asked your teacher a question. Can you tell us about that experience?
Well, we were at the Egyptian Museum in Boston on a field trip, and all the kids were fascinated by the mummies. And as they went to the later dynasties, the art was sort of more crude and not as pretty. And I said, why was the earlier dynasties had nicer art? And the teacher told me their civilization was deteriorating. I never forgot that.
That really, really struck me.
Great.
Yes. In the context that you presented it in the book, it was really powerful. It gave me chills because it's really profound. She said their civilization was collapsing, right? And
that's
you
what the teacher told me. But I just noticed, and we went through a series of halls in the museum where you were going from the early Egyptians to the later Egyptians. And they had names on the stuff, and I asked that.
Yes, and you were the only one who noticed that, by the way, in the class.
I was the only one that asked about it.
Okay. Well, it's just interesting because there are other things that you're noticing that other people aren't talking about. And you see signs of that happening now, correct?
Well, I'm concerned about the skill loss. One of the visual thinking book was a big COVID project. And one of the things that made me decide to do it is I'm worried about skill loss. I worked with a lot of totally skilled tradespeople that own big shops. They had multiple patents and multiple inventions, and they're retiring out. And we no longer know how to make the equipment for a poultry processing plant. We have to import it. We also are not making the state-of-the-art electronic chip making machine. It's from Holland. And there's a reason for this. It goes back to their educational system. In 9th grade, the kids in Europe can go university or tech. We stick our nose up at tech. And treat it like it's a lesser form of intelligence. It's not. It's a different form of problem solving. I spent 25 years on heavy construction projects, building big Cargill plants. This is a world that educators don't have anything to do with. And, they say, well, the stupid kids take shop. Okay, the kids who can't do algebra take shop.
Yeah.
But they have a different kind of problem solving, especially with mechanical things.
Yes. And so what is it about that that bothers you so much when you notice?
It bothers me because we've got things breaking. I've been on a lot of questionable elevators recently.
Yeah.
We don't have people to fix stuff. And when we start looking at artificial intelligence, fixing elevators is not going to go away. Now, maybe I think there's some low-level computer programming that programming can do. And I was just reading an article today about, an expert programmer uses the program, the AI program, to do some of the simple work. The beginner program is learning from the AI program.
Oh, the beginner program.
The beginning programming person learns from the program, and the expert guides it.
Oh, I see.
But I'm concerned about how these programs make stuff up.
Yeah.
Like I played around a little bit with ChatGPT, and it did a great job of summarizing one of my papers and writing a cute thing about purple flying zebras. But then I read that a lawyer used it to like search the literature on case history, made up 3 fake lawsuit judgments.
Oh my goodness.
Up.
And you talked about that in your book, in Visual Thinking. I remember you were examining how this technology works and how it will spontaneously create.
Well, and it makes stuff up. Like I read a thing on my phone. We've had terrible problems with the Denver airport storms. Horrible. I was out of town, and I'm going, oh, am I going to get home yesterday? And so I look up all the storms and stuff at the disruptions at the Denver airport. And that thing that comes up that sort of summarizes stuff was talking about baggage problems, and had mixed in 20-year-old stuff about a failed baggage handling system that was ripped out of that airport 20 years ago.
Oh, no.
And that was mixed in with stuff that was happening now. And I know that because I've lived here for 33 years.
Yeah.
I'm going, yikes, it's making stuff up here.
Yeah.
And
that could be
that baggage handling system was ripped out years ago.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So, I mean, I appreciate what you talked about in your book about how there need to be fail safes, right?
Well, also, I'm teaching students now. For years, I've had students do an internet project where they pick out a subject in animal behavior, and they got to go get 8 journal articles off of 4 different scientific databases. In other words, teach them how to look up primary sources. This is going to get more and more and more important.
Oh,
okay, you get those little short snippet things to begin. You need to go look at the primary source, like, the Denver news station. Okay, for problems at the Denver airport, I would consider that a primary source. For finding out, looking up the National Weather Service.
Yes.
These are things I would consider primary resources for finding out what was really going on there with storms. And then scientific things. Looking up journal articles, and teaching students how to do that. And I told us we had to do a thing in our classes where you had to write down, what do the kids learn in the class, but other than livestock handling, which is my class. Okay, they're going to learn that, but they're going to learn how to be a better observer. They're going to learn how to draw a scale drawing. They also are going to learn how to look up primary sources of information. That might be one of the most important things they learn in school.
Wow.
Always look up stuff that's primary sources. So if it's news, I'm a reporter that's been there.
Wow.
If it's scientific stuff, go into the scientific databases, Google Scholar, PubMed, look the stuff up. And then I can tell now, I have deep knowledge of my field in cattle handling. And then I asked it in a way that was not the way I normally talk. And it found some extension publications, but it also pulled up a really old 1970s design for cattle handling facility. It's really bad. Does not work.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I know that they have deep knowledge. There's going to be a need for people to have deep knowledge of stuff to go in. That's just rubbish.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to look up primary sources. So if it's weather at the Denver airport, I'm going to like the local reporter, the local TV station, the local paper, the weather service, the various weather reports. Not something that's just aggregated. And if it's something serious with science, go up and look at the original journal articles.
Yes, that makes sense. And
primary sources. The other thing I do when I'm trying to take the rubbish out of something is looking at multiple sources that I would consider to be reliable sources.
So you can sort of cross-reference the information.
Well, that's right. And now they're wanting the students to learn other things other than the subject matter of the class, I said, learning how to look up those journal articles might be one of the most important things you learn in college, period.
Yeah.
Importance of looking up primary sources. And you're going to learn that in my cattle handling class.
Mm-hmm.
And I let them pick out any animal behavior thing that interests. And you can't do cattle behavior. You got to do something more specific, where you've got to dig into the literature. You can use any animal.
Yes, we really need that, more of that these days, whether people are on the spectrum or not, is being grounded in practical reality.
Well, it's
right?
some of the stuff that people believe, I just can't believe it.
Yeah.
I remember this one lady, she thought airplane trails were a government plot.
Yeah.
I'm going, really? I was on a plane one time,
Mm-hmm.
and this lady was showing me this ridiculous junk that was on her phone.
Yeah.
And just so happened, a Southwest airliner went by us, leaving a trail. I said, look, it's Southwest Airlines.
Uh-huh.
It's not a government plot, and it's leaving a trail.
So if someone does have those kinds of questions in their minds, the thing to do would not to be just do a quick Google search and believe
You
the
can do a
first 10
quick
things
Google
that come
search
up.
But I can't believe some of the stuff some of the stuff is too controversial for me to talk about.
I
I
understand.
can't believe some of the rubbish that people believe.
Yes.
And
And
one of
that
the problems you've got with some of the algorithms for stuff online is the algorithm is set up, like a Facebook, for example, to get maximum clicks and maximum ad dollars.
Right.
Well, that
Yes.
tends to accentuate maximum garbage.
Absolutely.
If you just set the algorithm up to make money.
Yes, absolutely. Combined with a hallucinating AI.
Oh,
Right.
that stuff on Deep Dream, they discontinued that project.
Yeah.
That was
Good.
creepy. That was totally creepy, and that was discontinued. And what they
Yeah.
did in that is you keep forcing the program in an endless loop to find dogs maybe on grocery shelves
Uh-huh.
or in the sky. And you start getting weird stuff with eyes all over boxes of cereal.
That's interesting. I
Really,
think our
really
mind.
weird, creepy stuff.
Yeah. Well, and AI is copying our minds, right? And sometimes when we're looking for something that may not really be there, we'll still find it if we're not.
The other thing I'm concerned about is we've got to protect infrastructure from hacking. And the best way to protect it is old-fashioned mechanical controls that are electromechanical controls. If something gets too hot, spins too fast, gets too much pressure, old-fashioned control that's not computerized will turn it off before it damages itself or does something dangerous.
Yes, I love that part in your book, and it was really scary reading about how that kind of thing is not in place already. You would think they would have designed that from the beginning to have.
But
those
they don't see it.
Yeah.
Okay, we get ransomware attacks on businesses, and they mess up the trucking or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because they want money. So and they were erasing data off of people's iPhones.
Wow.
That was bad. They had the corporation's email address, corporation.com. We'll leave out the name of the corporation.
Right.
But what if they decided to attack, expensive, difficult to replace equipment?
Yes. And so what you mentioned in the book is that those fail-safe systems need to be not connected to the internet.
Well, you see, the other thing is you have some programmable logic controllers where a computer has to control it, like an electric train, for example.
Okay.
And that has to be completely isolated from the internet.
Okay.
But one time I went on an electric train, and I won't say where it was, and I looked at the sign, and I saw one of those gray boxes, that Microsoft puts up. It said an additional IP address on this network.
Oh, no.
I'm going, really? We'll leave out where that was.
Okay. Yeah. So, and that's another thing you spotted. Did anyone else spot that? Or?
Well, and then I was in a factory, and I saw a gray box appear on a control panel for a piece of equipment. And said, well, your software is out of date as of 2014.
Yeah.
And I found out the equipment had been bought used. Fortunately, that piece of equipment, if it got hacked, it wouldn't have been very serious.
Yeah.
Other equipment where it would be very serious.
Yes. Well, you've said that some of these things keep you up at night sometimes because
Well, you just have to
you see
protect it with you have computers that control equipment, and if those are hackable. They're very hackable if they're connected to the internet, and you just need to have old-fashioned electromechanical controls. They're not hackable because they're not even electronics.
Okay.
That will simply turn the stuff off if the computer asks it to do something that will wreck it or be dangerous.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I love how you're getting the word out about needing to include people in the workplace and make the school systems work for people that think like you do.
Well, you see, the first thing I talked to a lot of corporations in the disability meetings, and I said the first step is you have to understand that different kinds of thinking exist. I didn't know verbal thinking existed until I was in my late 30s.
Oh my.
I thought everybody thought in pictures. And this is why I think the visual thinking book is so important.
Yes.
I talked to a man yesterday at the airport, and he bought my book and was reading it on the plane. And he says, well, the teachers can never understand how I thought. I'd fix every kid's bicycle. And no, he's a visual thinker like me.
Yeah. Yeah, I can relate. I took you had a checklist to a sort of quiz, and I took that inside the book to sort of give you an idea of maybe how much visual thinking you have. And I came out like 16 out of 18, I believe, like quite.
For visual thinking or verbal thinking?
Yeah, visual.
Well, yeah, you'd be a visual thinker.
I think I have some of both of the.
Lots of people are mixtures. Lots of people are mixtures. That's really important. But when you got a kid that's autistic or dyslexic, that's where you might have an extreme object visualizer like me who can't do higher math, or you might have an extreme mathematician, which is a pattern thinker, and an extreme mathematician and an object visualizer that's extreme. You won't find it in the same person. They're opposite traits. One thinks in patterns, the other thinks in photorealistic pictures.
Okay, that's interesting. I think I lean more toward the object visualizing.
Object visualizer.
Probably, but I think I have some of the, I mean, I don't know, a little bit of the abstract too. I mean,
this is where a lot of people are mixtures.
Okay.
Lots of people are mixtures.
I was able to get through algebra, but the thing is that I never ever arrived at the math solution using the steps that they wanted me to take. I would get the right answer, but I couldn't show my work because that's not how I got there.
You see, but that's how math kids think. So you have that ability. You see, a lot of this math, they're getting it too verbal, and they want these kids to show the steps. That is not how math kids think.
Yeah.
They just see the answer. And a lot of these math kids should be moved ahead. You might have a third grader that needs a high school algebra book. See, the other thing is, if they're not exposed to it, how can they develop that math skill? They have to be exposed.
Right, absolutely. And so that would be like giving them the opportunity to be exposed to the higher level, that math, for example, right?
That's right.
Okay. Well, I know that reminds me of one thing that you warn about a lot is that the very people that could be preventing literally the collapse of our civilization.
Well, I didn't really say that, but let's say damage to important infrastructure equipment. I'd rather put it that way.
Okay.
And
I don't want to put words in.
There's a little overgeneralization there.
Yes.
They're going to need, as we're getting more and more problems, visual thinkers to keep water systems running, all this infrastructure going, keep power plants on. Because the problem you've got with verbal thinking is verbal thinkers tend to overgeneralize.
Okay.
Right? They had all that power outages in Texas.
Yeah.
You never heard them once talk about what froze on each station. What piece of equipment froze? And I don't know how you even begin to figure out how you're going to fix some of the stuff.
Right.
Some of them will be easy to fix, to winterize, and some of them are going to be hard to fix. But you need more specific information on what froze.
Yes, that seems like a big
What
thing to
piece
leave
of
out of.
equipment actually froze?
Yes, that would be key, wouldn't it?
But the verbal thinker overgeneralizes,
Yeah,
especially when
yeah.
they've never been out in the field and seen stuff. See, in working on my visual thinking book, I've worked with my fabulous co-author, Betsy. I'd write kind of disorganized, rough drafts. She'd smooth them all out. But for a verbal thinker like Betsy to understand a simple concept like leverage,
Mm-hmm.
trying to teach Betsy leverage on third grade science websites
Yeah.
work. So I finally said,
Oh,
have you ever just pried the lid off a paint can?
yeah.
That's leverage. Then she got it.
Oh,
When it
okay.
got relayed back, something she'd actually done involving leverage.
That makes sense. Yes, and you've talked about how a lot of really intelligent, gifted people, especially boys, might end up just sort of living their lives playing video games in their basements, or maybe even on disability, believing that they have a
Well, this is
disability.
a problem, and one of the ways to get them off the video games has been car mechanics. That's
Mm,
actually been very successful in getting them off video games.
okay, so having something useful to do with their
Well, and
hands.
it's also I talked to some of them, and they said that the motors were more interesting than the video games.
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah, I do remember you mentioning that in the book
It
too.
was more interesting to work
Yeah.
on the cars, but you see, you've got to get them exposed to that.
Yes.
And a
Yeah.
lot of them not becoming video game designers because there's 500 kids for every slot in that industry.
Oh, yeah. Well, you mentioned in the book visual thinking that children prefer real life play
That's right.
if they're given a choice.
They'd rather do real things.
Yes, that makes sense. And so a lot of us who are adults now, we're realizing that because our unique needs and gifts were not well understood growing up, our schooling and bringing up may have been inadequate, inappropriate, or even traumatic. And that left many of us ill-equipped for life when it wasn't necessary for us to, we could have more to contribute. We may have been labeled with disabilities or disorders. And, so I was wondering, you're very good at spotting opportunities and potential problems as
Well, and
well.
also seeing doors to opportunity.
Yes.
There's a doors to opportunity. People don't say this. That scene in the HBO movie, Temple Grandin,
Yeah.
where I go up to the editor and I get his card. That scene is absolutely real. That happened. And I recognized that if I worked for that magazine, that would really help my career.
Yes.
So I went up and I got his card, and then I produced a decent article.
That's such a key skill to have. And a lot of us, because of being sensitive to begin with and being bullied also because we've been different and being told that we're behaving badly, maybe receiving labels that didn't even match. How can we get better at spotting opportunities that might open doors
Well,
for
one
us?
of the things that helped me, because 50s upbringing, social skills like shaking hands, going up to people, that was more formally taught. I sold candy for charity. I'm realizing now how important that was on going up and talking to people. Parents had parties when you were 7 and 8 years old. You had to put your good clothes on and be hosts and hostesses for the party.
Oh, that makes
That
sense.
taught social skills.
Yes.
And that's not expensive or difficult to do.
Right. So it's having the courage to, first you have to have courage before you can have confidence, right? You got to have the courage to
When
put
you
yourself
get
out.
confidence, I went around knocking on doors selling candy for charity. I was maybe 10. And I'm realizing what I learned from that.
Wow. So practicing what's scary and making it interesting can help you get to the
I
point
used
where
to
you
be
have.
terrified of airplanes.
Were you?
Senior in high school, I had very scary emergency landing. We went down the slides. I had to get over that. I had to make airplanes interesting. And I got to fly in the cockpit of a plane. This is back in the 70s. In a plane full of cattle going to the Puerto Rico.
And that changed it for you. It's like immersion therapy.
Well, you have to make it interesting.
Okay, that makes sense. And so now it doesn't bring up the same fear in you now?
Oh, no, I took a picture of weird thunderstorm stuff out the window of an airplane. Then yesterday, it was the clouds that looked like this science fiction alien attack that was at the airport yesterday. This round, weird cloud. I can show it to
Yeah.
you.
Oh my.
This looks like something out of a science fiction movie.
Oh
And
my goodness.
it was at the airport yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Just got to get it up now. Yeah. This was like really, really totally weird. Dig that. Let's get it on horizontal here.
Okay.
Look at that.
Oh my goodness.
That looks like something out of a movie.
Yes, it does. Where was that?
That was at the airport yesterday.
Oh my goodness. In Colorado?
Yeah.
Wow.
No, we've had absolutely crazy, crazy weather.
So have we here in Sacramento. It was like really, really mild, unseasonably, and then all of a sudden it's 108.
Well, that's exactly what we've had here. Now we're cooler. Now the good news is everything's green, and we need the rain, and we need the rain really badly.
Yeah.
So that is the good news.
Mm-hmm.
But we're seeing crazy weather patterns.
Yeah.
I've lived here 33 years. I've never seen a cloud like that.
Yeah.
And
Really?
it dissipated in about 20 minutes.
Okay.
And
Wow.
but I just walked around. I was coming off a flight and I went around the corner in the terminal building. There's one big window that looks right out the end of it. And there that was. And I'm going, you gotta be kidding.
Wow. And you were calm enough to just be.
I just took
focused on
I go, this is, first of all, I looked at it for a little bit. Then I
Yeah.
got my phone and said, I gotta get a picture of that. That's just too
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah.
It looks like something from a movie.
Yeah, it does. It does. So
And I looked up that cloud. It's called a roller cloud.
roller.
A roller cloud, and it's
roller.
quite rare actually.
Oh.
And I found a whole bunch of them online, but that one was really low.
Yeah.
I came around the corner and I saw that out the window. What is going on here?
My goodness. That's really interesting.
And nothing was storming yet at this point.
Oh, okay.
The storm was off in the background and it looked like really black.
Yeah.
And then it went away.
Wow.
But then there's another afternoon. I'm glad I was not there. I think Wednesday was just terrible. Airport was really shut down, complete mess.
Yeah.
And one storm after another.
Yeah. Well, I just watched a recent video of you on YouTube where a little boy was interviewing you outside and you gave him an autographed copy of your book.
Yeah.
He was so cute. He it looked like he lived on a farm.
Yeah.
I think he was autistic maybe, but you were explaining to him that you saw a storm cloud in the sky and so you had them cover the books before it even started raining. And that's an example of visual thinking.
Well, that's right. We were at a festival, a farm festival.
Okay.
And we were in a kind of those flimsy little tents like you have at a farmer's market.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a backdrop photographs. And we had like, I don't know, like 15 boxes of books there. Like you don't want to get wet. And I said, quick, get the forklift pallets, put them on that.
Yeah.
The boxes on them. We took the photographic backdrop, put it over it. And then 4 people held the tent so it wouldn't blow away.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Well, I made sure those books didn't get wet.
Well, that's
Yeah, I
great.
saw that coming.
You saw it coming.
And I wanted them on forklift pallets because I knew what would happen. And there happened to be some old forklift pallets. I said, get those forklift pallets, get 2 of those. We'll put them on that, the boxes on that, keep them up off the ground.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's exactly a great example of what you're talking about, is having people like that around and everybody
the
working
photographic background sign became the tarp.
I love that. That's creative too. And it worked, right?
I didn't want them racked.
Yeah.
And there was no way we could get in there and get them out. And the storm just sort of whipped up real fast. And
yeah. Okay. And so how can parents raise their children who are not well served by the school system yet to develop their abilities and learn to use their abilities?
Well, my mother always worked on developing my art ability. And, the school doesn't have art class. Maybe we need to start an art class. Maybe have the kids join 4-H. They've got all kinds of good programs.
Mhm.
And get some things started in the community, getting kids doing things. One thing Mother did when we were little kids, she did theater for the kids in the neighborhood.
Oh,
It's something that she did.
yeah.
And it wasn't very expensive, and kids loved it.
Oh, I love that. And that can help develop confidence. I could
Exactly.
imagine. Mm-hmm.
We need to be developing more of this stuff in the neighborhood.
That makes sense. And I've heard you talk about how children today sometimes are not learning how to use basic everyday tools, even such as a scissors or ruler.
No, they're not. Like, this is the reason why I did this book, Calling All Minds, is my kids. It's all the projects I did as a little kid, things like bird kites and parachutes and stuff like that. And I tinkered and I tinkered and I tinkered with this stuff until I got it to work. And kids are not doing that today.
Yeah. Yeah. So for parents, like these days, there are parents, some of the people now who are adults with children or children in their lives, they may have grown up without learning how to use scissors or a ruler or not understand how those basic skills are relevant.
The other thing is, I just was on an interview this morning with an anthropologist that looks at different, indigenous cultures and how they raise kids. Basically, they just let the kids all hands-on learning, other kids teaching kids. In the 50s, we were kind of free range and building forts and everything. Now, okay, I have a paper snowflake in my book. A teacher asked me 2 years ago, this is recent, what happens to the kids' self-esteem if they cut it wrong and it fell apart? And I'm like, really? You get another piece of paper and you try again. Or maybe you have someone show you how to do it again.
Yes. That makes so much sense. Again,
I just couldn't believe that.
Yeah.
You've got kids today that have never used scissors, to make something like this. And when I did a book signing for this book about 5 years ago for Calling All Minds, about 20-30% of the kids in suburban Denver had never made a paper airplane.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So why now I can see easily why that's important, but for those of people out there who may not understand why something like that would be so important to use scissors or make a paper airplane, it may seem like just an optional thing that doesn't matter that much. Can you explain why?
I think what's happening is the verbal thinkers have taken over.
Yeah.
But what worries me is we got verbal thinkers that become a state legislator. They're going to make educational policy about autism, and they don't even know that you can have autistic kids that do not speak, they never learn to speak.
I see.
That's a shocking lack of knowledge.
Yes.
And I just ran into that very, very recently.
I see the connection now, because if they don't understand that and they're the ones making the legislation for what children
that's the problem.
Yeah.
Is they're making legislation where they don't have enough information to make good legislation.
Wow. So that's why it's so important to get this information out to people in general, right? What signs might parents or teachers look for to help them identify which children might be visual thinkers so they can help?
Well, let's say, I usually don't find it in 2-year-olds. Okay, when I was like 7, drawing ability started. I was tinkering with all these kites and things like that.
Yeah.
Kids liking Legos. That's a sign. And then one of the problems I'm seeing is they're not graduating to tools.
Oh.
They just keep doing Legos. So the visual thinkers like me like art, animals, and all kinds of mechanical stuff. The math thinkers, well, if you got a kid that's good at math, move them ahead. Move them ahead. Don't make them do the baby stuff. Move them ahead.
And what if they're good at one type of math but not another? Say geometry but not algebra. In my case, I did algebra. I couldn't do geometry.
Well, yeah, and there's some people that's how the pattern goes. I never got to take geometry because I kept pounding away on algebra. I probably would have been a bit better at geometry.
Interesting. So let them excel where they excel and not make them do what they are having trouble with, right?
Well, there's too much emphasis on the deficit and not enough emphasis on what is the person going to do when they grow up. I worked with a visual thinker that was an average student. He took a welding class. He started making little small projects. He's building beef plants now, and he has a corporate jet, and he still can't do algebra.
Wow.
But he's a visual thinker who builds stuff.
Yes, I love examples like that because things like that don't have to keep us back at all if we just play to our strengths.
Well, you see, now the problem I've got in your state, I wouldn't be able to graduate from high school.
Yeah.
So I've often thought, what would I do if I was a student in California? Well, I know how the back door works. So let's say they waved a magic wand and I'm 18 years old, low income background, but I have all my knowledge.
Yeah.
Head straight for the Amazon warehouse or straight for the chip factory because I'm going to design the next one.
Oh.
I have seen people do that pathway in the meat industry. I've seen it. I just talked to a family within the last 6 months. Their son went out to a fiberglass tank factory as a laborer. 6 months later, he repaired every machine in that factory.
Oh my goodness.
See, that's backdoor.
Yes. Sort of like a do-it-yourself apprenticeship.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Get yourself in there, get exposed. Do you think that's possible for those of us who've already reached adulthood and say maybe we already were labeled with a disability, but we're now
it's never too late because these video game addicts, a lot of them were young adults.
Okay.
And one of them is fixing trains now. The railroads think
wonderful. So what can adults do who are just starting to meet those needs that never were met to learn how to thrive in the kind of work we're good at? You know,
so they have to get exposed, and so they started, slowly introducing them to auto shop. You slowly introduce people. You don't do it instantly. It's a gradual transition, and you see what's moving. Gradual transitions are better than sudden transitions.
Okay, that makes sense.
That's what you do.
Gradual, yeah. And then it's more natural, yeah. So what about the neurotypical people, or say more verbal thinkers maybe? How can we help them to have better success, including the neurodiverse people in their lives? For example,
you're asking a very, very generalized question.
Yes.
So my mind thinks in specific examples.
Well, I have one.
That have been successful. Jobs that having the pilot's checklist with the steps with a save.
Yes.
A fencing job, electrician's apprentice, just as a job in the store running the cash register, jobs that would have been saved if they had just written down the steps.
Yes, I thought that might be too general, and so I do have a specific example for you. In the same interview I mentioned earlier, where you were with a couple of other women on the stage at the Temple Grandin School.
Okay.
One of the women was an author, and she said, or no, it was another woman, but she said that she used to screen out job applicants who couldn't make eye contact. And she's learned now that may not be the best criteria to find out who's good.
If you're hiring somebody to build stuff, eye contact doesn't matter.
Right.
Hiring someone to be a computer programmer, eye contact's not a skill you use for programming computers.
Well, that's a good point.
You're going to be hotel desk, customer service, yes, then that's something where that's a skill you might need.
That's I love that perspective, because it's more about what is needed in the job itself.
That's right.
Than trying to evaluate the character.
What is actually needed in the job.
Okay. That makes sense. So, because a lot of times in our culture, I've observed many people making character judgments based on behaviors such as holding a door open for someone else, or walking through a door that's being held open, looking someone in the eyes, the strength of a handshake.
Well, and some of that stuff, can be learned. Something like waiting politely in line, not pushing in line, holding a door open, saying please and thank you. That's simple stuff that 50s upbringing, kids were taught that.
Yes, that's interesting.
That's not hard stuff to learn.
No, although I do have one question for you, because a lot of us also may have trauma, or sometimes it's hard to tell between the symptoms of trauma and being on the spectrum, and as far as anxiety goes. And so some situations can, like in the movie about your life, I remember it was really difficult for you to go through a sliding glass door at first. And so I'll use myself as an example. Sometimes when someone's holding a door open for me, I freeze because I have some trauma in my past too. And so,
these are things, you see, that stresses the nervous system.
Yeah. And so I just wanted to kind of explore a little bit on the topic of getting different kinds of minds together and learning how to work with one another.
Well, the first step is realizing they exist. That's the
okay.
first.
Okay.
And then examples of complementary skills. Let's go back to the beef plant. What I observed is that the people I worked with that made clever mechanical devices were not the ones that worked on the boilers and refrigeration. That was done by the more university-trained mathematical engineers, because you have to have more math for that. And then you had all the like packaging equipment, stuff like that. That's made by the visual thinkers.
So all of us working.
And I saw that division of labor at every single factory I worked in.
Interesting.
They're all the same.
So they're all needed. All of the perspectives.
Oh yeah, we need all the different kinds of minds, because what happens with these shops where you have these visual thinkers that are really good at building stuff, once a shop gets to be a certain size, they're going to have to hire a verbal thinker to run the business.
Yeah.
Just going to happen.
Yeah, right. The suit.
They have to hire a suit.
Yeah.
And they need it.
Yeah.
Because they're going to make sure the bills get paid, customers pay for stuff, supplies are ordered. Just keep the business running. Do the accounting.
So it sounds like it's a good idea to educate everybody to learn how to appreciate one another's strengths rather than just getting on each other's nerves.
Well, you see what's happened by taking out the hands-on classes, then the verbal thinkers get so abstract.
Yeah.
That how are you going to fix things? How are you going to actually do stuff?
Yeah.
You talk about abstractions like being an inclusive job site or something like that. See, I'm going to think more about, I've been on a lot of construction projects. I've been with the worst bosses and the absolute best bosses, beautifully run jobs, horribly run jobs.
Yeah.
Seen the whole gamut.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So it's really clear to me that, the reason I named this summit Mama Bear Summit is the Mama Bear energy. What it means to me is standing up for what's important, doing what it takes to insist on what is most important for yourself and for your family, making them non-negotiable. And I think you're a stellar example of doing that, even if you may not have thought of it that way all those years ago. Self-advocacy, persistence, determination, confidence, insistence on having your voice heard and offering your gifts. And for the people out there who it may be difficult to consider making the effort to do all that, what are the greatest rewards that have come out of this life course for you, as opposed to if you had just been content to withdraw?
When I did those dipping vat projects that were shown in the movie, I had a very big urge. I wanted to prove I wasn't stupid. That was a gigantic motivation.
Yeah. So how did it feel? What was
when they worked, I was super happy about it.
Yeah. And to finally be acknowledged, right?
Yep. Oh yeah, it was.
Must be fulfilling.
I got it all written up in the national beef magazines.
Yeah. I love that. That's beautiful. And what eco-friendly living means to me is living in harmony with the realities of the world around us, the reality of who we are and who other people are, not fighting against it or trying to make people fit into the boxes that are like us, because that doesn't really work in the long run. And
I tell business leaders, and I do a lot of talks with corporations, a lot of banks, pharmaceutical companies, tech companies, hospitality, travel. And the thing that I tell them is you need the skills. The kinds of minds, you need them.
Yes. I love what you said in the movie. The line in the movie was, what's good for cows is good for business. You help them see what. And so what came to my mind in this context is what's good for neurodiverse people is good for civilization.
Well, you see, you need the skills.
Yeah.
I remember working with an electrician that worked in one of the plants. He had a little shop. I'm sure he was on the spectrum. He was the resident genius. And he lived in that little shop for years. And he could fix anything electrical. And then the plant got sold. This is where when bosses change. and he got shipped off to another plant, and it did not go well.
Oh,
Yeah, when bosses changed, when I was working for that magazine, I almost lost my job because we got a new boss, and I didn't. The new boss thought it was weird, but Susan, who did the advertising, I think she was on the spectrum. She says the new boss doesn't like you. We're going to have to get a big scrapbook together of all of your articles to show to Jim. And then he did that. He gave me a raise.
Oh, wonderful.
But I didn't see the warning signs.
Yeah.
The subtle warning signs, and I would have just been fired. But this is something I've seen quite often. When a boss changes, that can be a real risky time for somebody on the spectrum.
Yes, you've gone into
because
that.
The previous boss just let this guy have his little shop, and whenever
Right.
his electrical genius was needed, he'd come out of the shop and do what he could do.
Yeah.
And nobody messed with him, and he was there for years.
Yes.
And unfortunately, he was an older guy, probably in his 50s, when he got sent to another plant with very bad results.
Oh, so it's very important to have everyone understanding that everyone's needed, even if they need certain accommodations.
Well, the pilot's checklist is an accommodation that will save countless jobs.
Yeah.
I have no verbal working memory.
Okay.
Yeah,
and look at what you've accomplished.
Well, when I do a project meeting, we're trying to discuss what a job has to do. What land I could have, what the boundaries were, how many cattle per hour. You can only ask one question. It's the most important question.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Okay, well, it's been good to talk to you.
I want to highly recommend to the audience to watch the movie Temple Grandin if you haven't seen it already.
And get my book on visual
exactly.
thinking.
Definitely get yourself a copy of this
Visual
beautiful book. It's wonderful. I'm almost done with it. And in fact, speaking of the book, Dr. Grandin has generously offered to give away an autographed copy of this book to one of our viewers. So there'll be a link available that you can use to enter your name into the drawing to win this book. So Dr. Grandin, where should our audience go to find out more about what you do?
Well, I've got two websites. I have templegrandin.com for autism, and I've got grandin.com, my last name, for livestock information. And
Okay.
I've got lots of articles, scientific articles online. Some are open access. The newer ones are open access, and the older ones, unfortunately, are not. But some of them are on grandin.com, my website.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. We'll have that information on.
Okay, well, great to talk to you.
Thank you so much.
All right.
It was wonderful talking to you.
Okay,
Thank you for being so generous.
All right. Goodbye.
Goodbye.